Hi everyone, it's Emily, and I want to tell you about the nightmare I've been living in my whole life. Getting out of it wasn't easy. Still, I managed to escape, but at the cost of a relationship with my mother. I will never go to the circus or to the zoo. It's not because I love animals or am an advocate for animal rights. The reason is because I'm just one of the few people who really understands what it means to live in a cage. You see, my mother was so afraid of responsibility that she literally kept me locked up since birth. You know, just a year ago, it wasn't a problem for me that I couldn't leave my home. Well, precisely speaking, I could leave the house, but my walks were limited to our yard, one part of it, the part fenced off and overlooking the forest. I just didn't know any other life, you see? And my mom never told me that there was something behind the fence. She taught, treated, and cared for me all by herself, but never let other people see me. She kept repeating that all the secrecy was for my safety. It was only later that I learned, in fact, she wasn't protecting me, just keeping me hidden from people. My mother was beautiful, albeit a rather frivolous woman. She thought that having a child would destroy her reputation. So when her acquaintances and potential boyfriends came to our house, she locked me in the basement. It was the most terrible experience of my childhood. There was no light in the basement, and all I could do there was just sit on an old damp mattress and wait for my mom. Each time she threw me there, I was afraid of my mom forgetting about me. In my imagination, she was leaving me locked up forever. My bones would rot in the dampness, and no one would know that I ever existed. My fears weren't quite far-fetched. Guests sometimes stayed at our place for several days, and during these periods of time, nobody gave me any food. Don't get too horrified. My life wasn't just fear and suffering. Mom was never cruel, just very neglectful. When I grew up enough to understand some things, she stopped throwing me to the basement and even gave me my own room. True, the room was not much better, but at least I got to see the sun and didn't feel like a coffin. And there were books. In fact, all my knowledge of an outside world came from literature. Now I think that Mom censored the books she gave me, because I learned about many common things only later, after my prison break. But the books I had my hands on left me amazed. It seemed to me that they described other worlds, full of magic, miracles, and wonderful science. In fact, of course, those were completely normal stories about nature and other similar books. And when my mom left home for groceries or went to work, I had the 8th miracle of the world at my disposal. Well, by my standards, it was the first and the greatest miracle. I'm talking about TV. I was forbidden to touch it. The only TV set in the house stood in my mom's room under the lock and key. But forbidden fruit is always the sweetest. And when you have lived within 4 walls all your life, no lock will keep you away. I learned how to open the door so that my mother did not suspect anything. And during her absence, I kept watching TV. With the help of TV, I found out that my life was far from normal. Other children had walks, traveling, were free to communicate with their peers. Their parents let them roam the street. They weren't forced to a small yard. And they didn't have to talk and play as quiet as possible so that the neighbors couldn't hear. Then I firmly decided to escape as soon as possible. I understood that in a few years, it would be too late, because I was already lagging behind in development. But at the moment, there was still a chance to be saved. I just turned 16, and despite all the limitations, I was a smart girl, able to use all the available information. When my mother left on a business trip, leaving me with no food at all yet again, I packed my things and opened the front door for the first time in my life. I ran, trying not to look around because the surroundings seemed really scary to me. People, cars, shops used to just be unseen sources of background noise, and now they all suddenly took shape. TV taught me that I needed to contact the police. So when I saw the first policeman, I spoke to him, and then happy changes began. The policeman didn't turn me away, even though I was incomprehensible and a miserable creature. Instead, he gave me food and called child services. When I told my story to the officers at the police station, many cried. Seriously, adult men and women cried of pity and horror. Naturally, they didn't return me to my mother. The specialists first brought me to the hospital and then to a boarding school. And the funny thing is that the boarding school turned out to be a really cool place for me. They fed me, treated me well, and even socialized with me. I was given a fresh set of documents. Now, I was a full-fledged citizen, not some freak child from the basement. And while social services were occupied with my mental and physical health, the police sent my mother to jail. There, she would languish for a long time. Now, everything is good, more or less. Psychologists and psychotherapists continue to work with me. I'm no longer afraid of people, and I can go to a store all by myself. Of course, there's still a lot of work ahead, but I'm sure I can handle it. The only thing that haunts me now is the question about my mom's true motives. I still wonder why my mom did all of this to me. Earlier, I thought I understood her, but when I found out that in fact normal parents don't lock their children in the basement, I got completely lost. Even now I have no answer to the question. And Mom keeps silence, although the psychiatric examination found her sane. So here it is, my life story, a complete nightmare for claustrophobics. Write in the comments if you've heard or encountered anything like this. Tell me whether I really deserved all of that or not. Good luck to each and every one of you.
Hi y'all, I'm Jennifer, Emily's mom. I don't want to make excuses or play the pity angle. You've got my story right here, and it's up to you what you make of it. I gave birth to Emily when I was only 18. I really wanted to make a family with the man I loved, raise our daughter together, and maybe have more kids with my beloved. Unfortunately, life soon made adjustments on its own and ended my dreams. Emily's father soon told me that he simply wasn't a family man, and that was that. He packed his things and rode off into the sunset. I returned to my parents, who never missed a chance to remind me how screwed up I was. Still, they helped a lot with Emily's upbringing over the years while I finished up my studies and found a decent job. When you've got a small child, you've got no time for any romantic relationships. All you want to do is sleep and rest and nothing more. So first I finished university and then I found a nice job. Then Emily and I moved from my parents to a house of our own. I wasn't an 18-year-old beauty anymore. I was already 23 and I had to do something with my life. What I really needed was a nice man and a good relationship to settle down with. Unfortunately, I had no idea where to find one. Soon I gravitated to the idea of online dating. I've got a stable internet connection, so I made a page on a dating site. At first, I encountered a bunch of freaks and creeps, yet later on I met several guys who were more than a little okay. Soon we stopped being virtual acquaintances and moved on to real life. Of course, when I would go out on dates, I left Emily with my parents. But then, disaster struck our little family. My mom and dad went on to the next world together, just like the couples from those romantic movies. They passed away in their own bed, holding hands, smiling. That's how our neighbor found them in the morning. And my life only grew more difficult. Now I had no one left to take care of Emily when I was busy. By the laws of our state, you are prohibited to leave a small child at home alone. I needed to hire a babysitter, but I simply had no money for that. Besides, sometimes I had night shifts. And that's when I devised a brilliant plan that may have included our basement. At first, I only left her there when I had night shifts. I didn't even think that I was a sadist or something. Our basement had all the conveniences a little girl could need. Even a separate bathroom with a tub and a bedroom with internet connection and a laptop. Besides, I've never told Emily that it was a punishment or something like that. For her, those basement nights were just a game, some sort of very special adventure. In a year or so, I was promoted, and they started sending me on business trips. Emily was still too young to be alone, and I couldn't take her with me. Now I had to leave her in that basement for a couple of days at a time, but it was still just a game for her, our little secret. I even registered Emily as being homeschooled so that the school officials didn't ask questions about missed classes. But once, Emily left the basement and walked into my room right in the middle of my date. Of course, the man immediately ran from my house and never called me again. Soon I discovered that men really don't like women with kids, especially when those kids were pretty grown up. Soon I lost 2 more suitors because of Emily. Now I just had to move my girl to the basement on a pretty much permanent basis. Please, don't think badly of me. I had to do what I had to do. We even gave the basement a total renovation. Besides, she never actually stayed there for too long, only when I was absent or when I had a date. When I was at home and no one else was around, I allowed her to move around the house and even play in the yard. I just ordered her to stay out of sight of everyone else. They would have definitely harmed her or forced her into the foster care system. I just couldn't allow that. I was searching for a husband. I built a career and was generally occupied with my own business. And somehow, before I knew it, my little girl grew up when I wasn't looking. Yet she didn't just grow up. She wished for freedom, and I couldn't give her that. At the time, I managed to get into a stable relationship, and my boyfriend even wanted to propose to me. Of course, I never told him that I had a daughter. If he knew that, he'd never propose to me. Of that, I was sure. I suppose sometimes I really went too far, but please, try to understand me too. At first, I was just a young and stupid girl, and then I was just trying to build my own happiness. Moreover, I never abandoned my daughter. I taught her, fed her. I even allowed her to play in the backyard. And she turned out to be an ungrateful brat and just ran away. On that day when those policemen came, I didn't even understand at first what they wanted from me. And when I understood everything, I got so angry. I tried to prove that everything was actually okay, but Emily lied to them and made me to be a complete monster. Of course, no one listened to me after her fabricated stories. And that's how I went to jail. Luckily, I was out on bail soon enough. Still, I have no wish to see my ungrateful daughter anymore. Suffice it to say, I have no daughter. She really screwed me over and felt no remorse. Tell us your thoughts about this story in the comments. If you've got any similar experiences, tell us about it. Share this story with your friends, leave us a like, and follow us to get notified of new, interesting stories.